You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, host of BioTalk, and we just came back from the International Bio Convention in Philadelphia a couple weeks ago. A lot happening, but there's a lot happening right here in the BioHealth Capital Region, and we have a guest today who's had a large event happen within the BioHealth Capital Region in the last couple months, and we have Dr. Marco Chacón, who's the founder and past chairman of Paragon Bioservices, and also currently the Assistant Vice President, Industry Alliances at the University of Maryland Baltimore. Marco, welcome to BioTalk.
Well, thank you, Rich, for inviting me for the BioTalk. Certainly would like to share with you a number of experiences over the last, 2+ decades of being in business and later on, as Rich alluded to, being part of the University of Maryland Office of Research and Development, where I was asked to form an Office of Industry Alliances. Perhaps we will touch on that a little later.
Yeah, and we'll talk a lot about your background because it's very interesting, Marco, and I got a chance to meet you when I first came to this region probably 7-8 years ago and watched how you have evolved and the company's evolved and how we have both evolved together as we become elder statesmen within this region. But I think the listeners would love to hear a lot about you personally. And you mind if I call you Marco, Dr. Chacón?
No, Marco, by all means. I'm still too young, Rich, for formalities.
Okay. But let's talk a little bit about your personal background and then work your way up to how we got to where we are today. And then we'll dig deeper into both Paragon and the University of Maryland.
Folks who know me a little better know that I came to the U.S. when I was 20 years old, and I don't want to go through all the details of that diaspora, but I came to the U.S. I'm an immigrant from Costa Rica, from Central America to be exact. I came to marry a beautiful woman from Ohio. I'm going to leave it at that. Soon thereafter, I was working, putting myself through school at Youngstown State University in Youngstown, Ohio. Eventually got done with that. I wanted to explore the possibility of getting into grad school. And to make a long story short, one of 2 universities that accepted me was the University of Maryland. So circa 1978, I landed. I never left. A short period of time living in Gaithersburg, about 3 years worth. And after that, back to Maryland, finished graduate school, went to work for DOD for a couple of years. This was the beginning, quite literally, of this new entrepreneurship, this drive for setting up, incubating new companies. And I answered the call, quite literally, from Hopkins, Johns Hopkins University, their campus, so-called the Bayview campus. They had, they wanted to set up an incubator, and were attracting so-called entrepreneurs to come and settle within. I answered that call. And took a very modest facility, kept on growing that over the years, and began to market a number of products. Initially, I wanted to be a manufacturer of new cell culture media, developing serum-free formulations, which is interesting. Nobody thinks about this, but in the 90s, and there were no serum-free formulations to speak of. Anyways, for a while, I did that, but I realized soon enough that highly commoditized products was not the way to go. And more people were asking us to do services for them. In other words, perform some of the tasks that scientists at the NIH and local universities needed to complete. And we were good at certain things and began to do more and more services.
Was the company called Paragon at that time you
started? The company initially was called Paragon Biotech.
Biotech, okay.
And to be quite honest to the listening audience, this was the very beginning. The Genentechs and Amgens of the world, a couple other outfits, were very modest operations at the time. And quite literally, I had to look up the term biotechnology. What is this wonderful thing that seems to be shaping? But the mid to late 90s began to, there are things that never fit into a business plan. Something called the internet became a reality. And with that, a modest operation in Baltimore became visible quite literally all over the world. And gave us an opportunity to compete with companies, pharma services companies throughout the U.S. in particular. began to market our services to the pharmaceutical companies. We were initially very well enfranchised within the boundaries of the BioHealh Capital Region, as we know it now. But it was the NIH, NCI, local universities, and continued to do more and more services. Eventually had the bandwidth and the personnel to market and do sales in the pharmaceutical sector. Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, close to my heart, insofar that they were the first pharmaceutical company that took us seriously, and that began a relationship that lasted for several years. The nature of the work, to interject, to go back a little bit, soon thereafter we were working with Lilly and Bristol Myers and Merck and the others. So the level of sophistication of the services that we provided continued to get better and better, greater skills, new employees, larger capacities, and it became more and more a pharma services company.
And what were the anchor services you provided that people found you to be different from some of the other people?
Well, at the time, everybody wanted to clone a gene, express a protein. Soon thereafter, they were working with recombinant viruses. We built a skill set in those areas. So protein expression, protein purification, virus production, virus purification. But I had a whole suite of other services, analytical tools, histology, immunohistochemistry, even electron microscopy capabilities. So basically, the bread and butter for Paragon was making recombinants, making monoclonal antibodies, and recombinant viruses.
And did your product line grow at the request of your customers who needed additional services and products they couldn't find other places?
No question. I think that in this business and in just about any business, it's about building relationships. When a prospective client or an existing client begins to really trust you and trust your judgment and trust the skill set within a company's team, my crew was extremely capable, and that came through quite easily. It was always a pleasure to get ourselves invited to talk directly with PIs at any of these companies. And, of course, you have to hold your own and be also very frank. There were times when we did not have the skill set, but, you just simply level with your client. But once you have that relationship going, you can grow into new areas, sometimes even with their assistance in terms of referring us to original literature or outright teaching us some processes.
I think I read that you had spent 27 years from the day you co-founded it to sort of when you stepped down and brought it some additional management. So how many different stages do you characterize Paragon having gone through over that 27 years under your leadership?
Well, I guess in stages of complexity of the tasks that we were able to perform, for a number of years, the company was strictly in the preclinical world with a potpourri of tools and capabilities that found themselves useful just about to any biotech or pharma company for that matter. We grew in terms of our sophistication to then provide process development services. My frustration, or our frustration, was that we could put a strong protocol together, but we were losing, the manufacturing piece to larger pharma services companies. At one point, we decided, and it took, I think, foresight on our part and strength, that we were going to add GMP manufacturing capabilities, increase our scale of our services. And that was done now to talk about phases in terms of time. We moved the company from Hopkins Bayview because there was no more space available to us. And to be quite frank, it suited us well for those years, but the facilities were rather modest, and we needed something better. Certainly shows much better for when our clients will come in for audits and looking at our capabilities. In 2007, 2008, the University of Maryland Biopark, located adjacent to the professional schools, medicine, dental school, pharmacy school, law school, graduate school, nursing school, and social work, to be exact. So being right next to the university was a definite plus, and I may elaborate on that in a little while. But that was we moved to the biopark in March of 2009. We were building infrastructure throughout 2008, and you may remember how stressful, those months were due to the banking crisis. And to be quite honest, it was a bit challenging. my crew, and certainly the CEO and our CFO and the upper management, we all took a hit in terms of income. But I think I turned that around I think it was a creative sort of way and in a fair way. I told my people that whatever income they were not going to receive because of reduction in salaries, that was made out to them at the end of the year in the form of stock options. And for 2010, which because these austerity measures spilled over into 2010, half the year, 2010, but by then we had greater capabilities. And to this day, I do believe strongly that if you're going to do an expansion, do it on a downturn, because you come out of that hole in due time with strength, with greater capabilities. You can pick up a lot of talent because there were a lot of layoffs throughout the industry. And 2010, like turning a switch on and off, it was a banner year for us. So at the end of 2010, I netted everybody, their lost income in cash. So that built a lot of credibility with my crew, loyalty, all those good things. And many of them remain with the company even to this day. Some of them, a few of them, better than 20 years with the company.
That's great. That loyalty is extremely important when you're trying to build a business like this.
It's paramount, Giles. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and the 2010 was a threshold year for you. And how many people did you have in 2010?
Well, we brought in about 35, 38 people to the BioPark in 2009. We continued to grow the company. In an operation like this, you need from the molecular biologist to the cell biologist to the protein chemist to the chem engineers, process engineers. You need a whole team of quality assurance, quality control folks. Learn the term and implement it very quickly, which is standard in the industry. That is project management, which is absolutely imperative to have. But we kept on growing the staff. I don't quite remember exactly, but by the time that we brought, and we will touch on this in a little bit, institutional investors, we had in the neighborhood of about 120 people.
Super. Now you mentioned institutional investors. So I'm going to make the assumption you did all organic growth with your own capital to get to that stage, and then you brought in some outside investors when you got to this period of 130 people and you couldn't maximize all of the potential you had.
That is correct. I mean, and admittedly, out of my lack of sophistication in terms of financing and growing a business, I was trained as a scientist, as a bench scientist, which is my first love. I still miss it. So I, in a way, was impersonating a businessman for perhaps too long. It became clear to me, and I always seek advice, however, from people in accounting, finance, and other areas that always were wonderful to provide me their support and their help. But it became a point where we had become a manufacturer, and to support a manufacturing platform, this is a capital-intensive operation, that is, and became clear that to take the company to a next level, that we were going to need external resources. And so we found or sent our business plan to a few investors, 2 private equity firms answered that call, and which is in and of itself a compliment. The fact of the matter is that PE or VCs don't fund any more than it's a little bit over 1% or less than 2% of the deals they look at. So New Spring Capital out of Philadelphia was the first to be interested in getting in. And subsequently, we brought in Camden Partners in Baltimore.
And so what year was that?
That was the fall of 2014.
14, okay.
Correct.
And at that time, in traditional Harvard business cases, they'd classify you as a threshold company, basically meaning an entrepreneur brought the company to a certain stage. You realized what your personal capabilities and strengths were. But at a certain point in time, you need to surround yourself with other people who have different talents.
That's correct.
And so this institutional capital from New Spring and Camden later enabled you to get the capital you needed. And also, I assume at that point, you started to bring in some external talent.
That's correct. I mean, upon financing, there is a transition there for the entire company. And certainly founders are faced with decisions to be made. And oftentimes, those are difficult decisions to make. At the end of the day, you spend your good portion of your professional career building something, and all of a sudden you need to hand that over to a new team. We were fortunate in finding the right talent. The president and CEO, it took a year or so to make this transition, but at some point we had a new president and CEO, a gentleman by the name of Pete Buzzy, who has a lot of experience in building businesses to new levels. Prior to that, he was very successful in increasing value and then doing a wonderful transaction for a local company that was Martech in Colombia. So anyways, with new leadership, with new funds, we continued to grow the company. We continued to assert ourselves in the gene therapy world. But there are times in life that you are working diligently, trying to build a business, but you know a little bit of luck too. Or you have been building certain tools that in due time, they mature to a point that really make a difference certainly in this company. We had been beginning to work on gene therapy some 15, 18 years ago. The vector of choice at the time was adenovirus. It turned out that it was not the best choice for a vector to use, given immunogenic responses. Soon thereafter, AAV was proposed as a safer platform, and we began to do a bit of work with AAV. Lentivirus was around as well. So we became very good at that even those many years ago. But by then, we had built the ability not only to engineer, produce these viruses, purify these viruses, but also build a whole suite of analytical tools, infectivity assays, titer assays, even electron microscopy protocols to make sure that the quality of your viral preparations was there. So anyways, we made that transition at the end of 14 into 15. My role at the company evolved into being the chairman of that board. And anyway, I served in that capacity until this recent transaction when the Paragon board was dissolved. And I can tell you a little bit more following
Sure.
the next question, I suppose.
Yeah, but let's talk for the entrepreneurs listening. A lot of entrepreneurs are very control-oriented. It's their baby, and they hate to give up, relinquish control. How difficult was it for you, who had been with your baby for 2 decades or so, and recognizing that in order for it to go further, you needed to leave go of some of that control?
Well, as an entrepreneur, but before that, as a human being, it was difficult for the very reason you presented. My wife and I built this company from the very beginning, and it was very difficult to make that transition. On the other hand, intellectually, you realize that if you are fortunate enough to convey a value to a group of investors, that you need to, if you accept those funds to grow the company, that you need to embrace it. Yeah, there were times that was a bit tough, but you have to accept it and move on and try to support the larger cause.
Let me ask you a question. It's not something we had talked about, but through this whole process, sometimes it's lonely to be a CEO. And then the question becomes, who are your mentors that you would go to and talk to that were outside of the company that you trusted for some advice?
Interesting you bring that point up. It is absolutely true. Being a CEO is you're alone. You're not only making hard decisions, your crew is a little reserved because they don't want to be too chummy with the boss for good reason. But on the other hand, you need support from elsewhere. I found like-minded people, something that I'm speaking to you because you're a great organizer of different forums and different things. We used to hold monthly meeting. It was the meeting of the regional CEOs where people were quite frank in sharing with the other leaders of companies the situations they were exposed to. We were all seeking advice on hiring practices, on personnel issues, on accounting, on patent protection, on all these things. And it became a very pleasant something that many of us who talk about it after a few years of not having this do miss. I guess I can give a shout to Paul Silver, who was the head of that group, and I've been looking for hopefully somebody taking the control and reproducing that.
You're going to have more free time now, Marco. How about?
I don't know about that.
Oh, yeah,
Rich.
But I'll work with you on reestablishing that, though.
Yeah.
You want to do that?
I'm here to help, and in whatever way I can. Yes, I think it should be done.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
But Let's talk about the big transition then. You mentioned that an event happened recently, and it's very public right now, so there's no secrets. Catalent purchased Paragon Bioservices for $1.2 billion. Congratulations. That's a big number for this region. So that's a really great success story in this region over the last 2 or 3 decades.
Well, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I think it's been terrific. It bodes well for our region, certainly for Baltimore, certainly for the University of Maryland, the University of Maryland Biopark, our developer, Wexford Science and Technology, both the university as well as our developer. These are people of great vision. Setting up a handsome biopark to nurse along or support, young companies was not common, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Today, this model has been reproduced very successfully, certainly by Wexford they're into 13, 15 different localities. It's the same concept is sort of aligning real estate development in the health sciences or to support companies in the health sciences with a large teaching medical institution. So whether it's Baltimore or University of Pennsylvania, Drexel, or Chicago, Kendall Square, or Cambridge.
I think they're in St. Louis, too.
They're in St. Louis.
Yeah,
they're in Arizona now,
right.
and other places. So the model, resonates, and I am very proud of the fact that the first biopark is the Baltimore Biopark. And Paragon certainly has benefited immensely from having access to state-of-the-art facilities within the park and also developing collaborations with programs and individual PIs across the street, quite literally, at the University of Maryland, particularly the School of Medicine. So going back to the transaction, the company had, from the time that it was funded, continued to grow more and more with quite a number of capabilities in this whole field of gene therapy. There were 2 particular areas of expertise for Paragon. We became very good at supporting manufacturing of vaccines of all sorts, whether they were recombinant antigens, viral, bacterial, otherwise, virus-like particles, a number of other platforms. But in addition to that, and more recently, that pretty much took over a lot of our capabilities, is the manufacturing of vectors for gene therapy. There are today literally dozens of rare and orphan diseases that companies are going after, utilizing the gene therapy approach. Given our past experience, as I mentioned earlier, 15, 18 years ago, we were quite ready when new requests and new interest began to happen once again, I would say 5 or 8 years ago. So today, we are very well recognized in the field of manufacturing, GMP manufacture for gene therapy. And I'm not a boastful person, but if not the leader, one of the 2 leaders in this field in the world. So we had been making very good connections, drawing quite a bit of business to the region. We were, in order to support, all material for all clinical phases, some of the bigger clients were asking us to support not only their phase 3 manufacturing, but also the commercial launch of their products. And quite literally, there's limited capacity for this. So there's been a burst in activity in building more and more infrastructure. So about a year plus ago, we committed ourselves to a large facility adjacent or right behind BWI Airport. It's a magnificent facility, also very centrally located. Is literally 15 minutes away, if that, from the airport, making it very easy for our clients, whether they're in Cambridge, Boston, or across the country, to come and oversee and interact with our people. So given that recognition and quite a bit of M&A activity over the last few years, Catalent was looking for an asset that was specialized in gene therapy. And anyways, that led to very serious interest on their part. They made a wonderful offer, and we went with it. So today, the company is part of a larger multinational. They have facilities all over, and we're extremely pleased for this to have happened. And it certainly cements a presence for Paragon in Baltimore, in Anne Arundel County now, at the biopark, and really, I like to believe, in fact, really affecting in a very positive way employment opportunities or the employment picture in our city, in our state. we're drawing great talent from a little bit from Pennsylvania, from Delaware, but mostly from Maryland. And I should say that as a region, we're truly blessed in terms of the access to great talent emanating from our great institutions, University of Maryland schools, Hopkins University, certainly universities in Montgomery County, D.C., the NIH, the NCI, and we continue to market ourselves not only as a company in Maryland, but also as a region. The Maryland region is really resonating around the country, and also a little bit of business across, the Atlantic into Europe. These clients, dozens of them, they know where their material comes from, and it's from the heart of Maryland, Baltimore to be exact.
And you're proud of that.
I am extremely proud of that, Rich.
I know. You should be. So the key is that some other entrepreneurs listening might say, first of all, they have trouble importing capital into the region. You were successful in importing capital from outside the region into your region to grow. And then the other thing is it's hard to get that global and national attention sometimes for companies in this region because they're undermarketed, underbranded, and they're not visible, but you were able to become visible because of the quality of your products and services providing to people around. So first question, if you're looking at packaging Paragon, how long did it take from the time that Catalent expressed an interest or there was an initial contact to them to the time you actually closed your transaction?
The actual deal happened very quickly, but that's because there was diligence had been done over the last 5 to 6 months or so. So there were a couple of suitors, if you will, that were interested in the space. So there were discussions.
So you had a bake-off.
So to speak.
Yeah.
And then I got very serious during the last couple of months before the actual execution of the deal. I would say that to the credit of the executive team at Paragon, from the CEO to the CFO and a number of executives, they have that operation running extremely well. Reports are pristine. Everything is in top-notch shape, and I think that had a lot to do with a transaction that was turned around very quickly.
Well, that's you're to be complimented because sometimes these drag out for long periods of time. And so I think the big question for a lot of people in the region is Catalent's got interests all over the United States, and they just made another acquisition in Europe, I saw.
In Italy, yes.
Yeah, so the question is, how committed are they, since you're really committed to Baltimore and the region, of keeping the operations here and growing this business within Baltimore and the BioHealh Capital Region?
Well, Paragon has obligations. Lease obligations for multiple years. And I think that they bought an asset that is for any reason for the excellence that they provide. Having 500 close. The forecast is, about 600 employees early in 2020. I think it will be difficult to reproduce that elsewhere. And again, we have obligations to the local marketplace. Is a large multinational. You can't never be. I don't know what the corporate plans of a publicly traded company like that would have, but certainly we have commitments in the region, and I foresee that shall remain the same for the foreseeable future, for years to come.
Right. Well, we hope they make a long-term commitment because you have demonstrated the talent is here, the partnerships are here, and this is a great place to grow a business. Right?
No, most definitely. There are other features. The cost of supporting this kind of an operation in other marketplaces
compared to Boston or San Francisco.
Boston, San Francisco is just night and day.
Right.
So there are other definite advantages of operating out of the state of Maryland. Moreover, I would say that Maryland is becoming or has become a center of excellence in manufacturing, not just us. We have great assets like Emerging Biosolutions. Certainly, Lonza has a presence in the state. Mm-hmm. A couple of other folks that bought Eras, the Germans, they're doing great here. BioFactura, other smaller outfits. but we are being recognized for our ability to manufacture biologics all-encompassing. Right.
Yeah, the cell and CAR T area and gene therapy is exploding in this region, which is super.
It is. That's certainly coming from the University of Maryland. They have committed themselves to manufacturing these are autologous transplantations of T cells, engineered chimeric antigen receptor T cells, CAR T, but other indications will be coming forth.
So we talked before a little bit, and you were the chairman, and then when the new management came in around 2017, you took a new role. In addition to continuing to shepherd or be the chairman of the board for Paragon, as the Assistant Vice President, Industry Alliances at the University of Maryland Baltimore.
That's correct.
Talk a little bit about that position, Marco.
I think it was a good transition for me, insofar that the role of chairman, while wonderful and, oversight and getting reports and such, but that is to be quite honest with you, I'm an operations guy more than anything else. I also love business development. I train as a scientist, but I think building relationships is something that I prided myself in being capable of doing, and I enjoyed it as well. So building those relationships. So when the university kept opening up an opportunity for me to organize an office of industry alliances, it is not very different from what I had done for so many years, which is making companies aware of the great things that a company like Paragon is capable of doing. Likewise, the role of this Office of Industry Alliances is look internally at those programs, the schools, the programs, the individual PIs that do wonderful things. And then for us as an office to package that, for lack of a better term, but basically it's not different from doing business development for a corporation. It's just that it's called differently inside of an academic institution, but it is about building awareness of those things that we're great at. And trust me, we have a comprehensive cancer center at the university, engaging in some of these new age technologies and therapies, cell therapies mentioned before. But we have a world-recognized Center of Vaccine Development. This was funded by Dr. Myron Levine. Currently, the director is a wonderful virologist, Kathy Nuzzel, and the work is recognized throughout the world. The Institute of Genome Sciences, Bioinformatics, and Microbiome. This is also highly recognized. The director of that center is one Claire Fraser. Dr. Fraser was instrumental together with some of her colleagues, deeply involved in sequencing of the human genome, and for the last 12 or so years has had a big presence at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. The Institute of Human Virology, headed by Dr. Robert Gallo. Terrific work that they have done throughout the world in dealing with HIV/AIDS, both on the therapeutic side, but also on trying to develop vaccines for that. The list goes on. An oncology center is a comprehensive oncology center. So we're trying to do business development, standardize our presentations, go to conferences such as the BioHealth meeting where last we met, Rich, and as we do that and raise that awareness, then more and more companies are coming in the form of sponsored research opportunities, clinical trials. So he's supporting from translational work all the way to the clinic.
Well, I think the university should be very happy and fortunate to have found someone like you who's a seasoned entrepreneur executive, built a successful business in the region, has partnered with the university while you were growing it, and you believe 100% in everything they do, as well as what Baltimore, the county, and the whole region has to offer.
Thank you for that. It's been a wonderful experience and adventure. As a scientist, I've been thrilled and feel fortunate that we get an opportunity to sort of look into the future, try to touch the future. And that's what we all, are including you. We're scientists, engineers, and men and women of I guess, takes a bit of courage to try to look at the future and change some things.
So let's talk about your future. And basically, I know that you're committed to where you are today and continuing to serve the university, but you have the opportunity to expand your horizon a little bit in addition to that university. Do you have any ideas about things you'd like to do in the future?
Anything entrepreneurial, certainly piques my interest. I will continue to do that, support new companies, assist, Office of Research and Development, Office of Technology Transfer, looking for companies to be interested in our technology. And for the right opportunity in the not-too-distant future, unfortunately, I'm not getting any younger, and so we have to make decisions quicker. But it's not beyond the pale that I would find a way to express myself in a creative way in the form of new technology development.
Well, I think that everyone is anxious to see that new creative way, and we'll all be monitoring that, Marco. But we want you to stay committed into this region and keep the passion you have, because I know you're extremely passionate about what you do and the people you work with around here.
Well, thank you very much, Rich. Anything that I can do to support the region, I think that you know that I am here to do just that.
One last thing. What advice do you have for the entrepreneurs listening regarding your career path? And what advice do you offer to them if they'd like to try to do something similar to what you've accomplished?
Well, I think that if an individual has a creative bent to their personality and identifies an opportunity, a problem, a way to fix something, I think it's easy enough, scary as all hell sometimes to just jump into the lake. But I think it takes, if you have the conviction, I tell, of late, I'm being asked to lecture graduate students and young postdocs as to alternative opportunities for careers other than the more conventional academic path. And I am very bullish and try to convey to them that their abilities can be well expressed, certainly in the private sector. Moreover, that if they have that impetus to do something creative, that they should owe it to themselves, particularly when we're young, to explore that. The worst thing that could happen is you fall, and you have to pick yourself up and identify those problems or those errors made and, adjust and move on. I would tell them to seek sage advice from people who have done that sort of thing and survived and thrived and grew companies. My experience has been I always came across wonderful, very generous people who have assisted me along the way. I think it's about hard work. There's no substitute to that, but if you're doing something, I will back up a little and say, find that solid question to the question of why. Why do I get up in the morning? What is it that I'm passionate about? And then if you do that and answer it correctly, then hard work is not hard work. There's quite a bit of fun involved. And that's another feature. You have to have some fun doing this. You have to have a sense of mission. We went into science and engineering to do good things. So all those things need to answer in the appropriate manner. Jump in. This state of Maryland has become very entrepreneurial. Those of us who started, in the early 90s, there was hardly anything available. Today, one pet peeve to a lot of people is, the financing side of things. That's changing, and it's changing quite radically. And I believe that always success begets success. Sizable transactions continue to happen at Hopkins, at Maryland, in Montgomery County. Investors pay attention. And one could say it, but a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, I suppose. The waters of Boston Harbor, San Francisco Harbor, have been overfished. So we have fresh waters here to be discovered.
Right. Well, that's really sage advice. And we're talking with Dr. Marco Chacón, who is the past founder and chairman of Paragon Bioservices, currently assistant vice president in industry alliances at UMB. And I'd say as a successful scientist, entrepreneur, business person, and now teacher and mentor to those people you're talking about, the students, the postdocs, the entrepreneurs, the advice you have, you become a bridge to help these scientists transition into industry, which is very difficult, and a role where we don't have enough people like yourself educating people to these alternative careers. So I compliment you on that and keep doing it, because we have so many talented scientists and postdocs here that just don't understand the opportunities or how to transition into business and industry.
I'll do that.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. So any closing comments, Marco?
Well, let's work together. Your organization is extremely visible throughout, but also other members of the community, of the, I hate the word, but it is ecosystem. I don't hate it. I think that's
a good word.
It's an ecosystem. We have a lot of things to be proud of. The FDA being here, I was neglected to mention it earlier, but that's a great asset for us. NIST, all these federal agencies, DOD, we need to leverage everything that we are great at. And as long as we do that, as long as we keep turning good successes around, investors will show up, and we will be a place to be reckoned with in the not too distant future.
I'm going to close by saying, when I first got here almost 8 years ago, one of the first things I did was have a wine tasting CEO roundtable without any agenda, just for a whole bunch of CEOs to get together. It's 8 years later, based on what you said before, with your informal CEO group that met monthly. I'd love to find a way. I'll help work with you, coordinate an informal CEO little roundtable just to kick it off and see whether or not it has any stickiness to it, and try to get something like that going, because we don't have informal ways for the CEOs to interact. We have a lot of formal ways, but really they're artificial because you really don't have quality time with each other.
Well, you added a very attractive feature to that, Rich. I think that the
wine tasting
will go a long way to attract many more CEOs.
No problem. We'll do that. So, Marco Chacón, thank you very much for being on BioTalk. Congratulations on your success. Stay in the region, because we need you, and we'd like to see you mentor many other successful entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.